anytime you confront something about yourself that has not been improving, that you're unhappy about, typically that you've been complaining about, you are now liberated to solve it. Business is the best personal development course you could ever buy. Welcome to another episode of the Bill Hauser Podcast. Still looking for a better name of the podcast. Please message me if you come up with one. And today, I just want to kind of have a conversation about how difficult growth and how difficult, business ownership is, and phases that we all go through when encountering growth in our lives and in our businesses. It's an interesting challenge to feel that you have to live up to a standard that other people have potentially painted for you. One of the things that I've kind of built a reputation around is being high energy. Oftentimes, like a lot of people comment on me being high energy, and there are times where that is my authentic, natural state, being high energy. But what I realize when I look at like the ebbs and flows of my path in business and life is that typically high energy periods are followed by low energy periods, and vice versa. High energy periods come after a low energy period. So whenever you're in a low energy period, a high energy period is coming. And whenever you're in a high energy period, a low energy period is coming. And I think that, when you look at social media, everyone kind of paints this picture as though their life is perfect, and it makes it difficult for people to be vulnerable about the struggles and the difficulty of growth and the realities of running a business. And it definitely, I don't think we put enough of a spotlight on the challenges. Like if every single person on Instagram only talked about their failures, my feeling would be that it wouldn't be as likely for them to gain a following, right? So we have to play this balancing game, in the modern day of sharing wins, but also sharing reality, humility, vulnerabilities. And this is more of like a kind of a vulnerable talk I want to kind of walk through, which is why growth doesn't feel good. Oftentimes when you look at the word growth, what does growth mean, right? Well, we look at the word growth, and typically when you talk about the word growth, you think of like a positive association, like you're growing in your life, you're growing in your relationships, you're growing in your business, right? But where does growth come from? Well, growth typically, in my experience, comes from you becoming aware of something that's not growing in your life, right? So the sooner you can become aware of something not growing in your own life, the sooner you can become aware and accepting of that and create an action plan around the thing that's not improving in your life, the faster you can accept that, the faster you can improve, right? I remember this is a funny example, but when I started SMBT in my company, there was this period of time where when I was grinding in the first 18 months and survival was my only focus in SMB team. That's it, just surviving. And there was a pretty long period of time where my health suffered dramatically because my number one focus was survival. It wasn't thriving, it was surviving. So I stopped working out, I started overeating, and eventually I became overweight. And there's this photo of me where I had gained like 30 pounds in the first 18 months of starting SMB team. And if you were to have studied my emotional state in those first 18 months, it was pretty positive, high energy. Growth was happening on the outside, but there was an area of my life that wasn't improving, and that was my health, right? And confronting that, I started becoming aware of the fact that I was getting a little overweight about 6 months after I started the company. And then it took me an additional 12 months for a total of 18 months. It took me another 12 months to accept that I had become overweight, right? Now, think about that feeling. Is it an exciting, woohoo, I'm so motivated today that I'm overweight? Is that an amazing feeling, right? No, it's not an amazing feeling when you realize an area of your life that's not improving, right? And for me at that point in my life, it was health. So I walked into my apartment this one day. I was working 18 hours almost every day. I mean, it was manic. It was crazy. I walk in and I have my shirt off, and I had been complaining a lot about the fact I need to start working out more. I need to eat less. I need to get in shape. I've been complaining about that for months to my wife, Emily. And one day she just looks at me. She's like, shut up. Why don't you do something about it? And yes, you're overweight, Bill. Do something about it, right? Would anyone, if you're listening to this right now, would you say that was nice of her to say that? Was she being a nice person? Would most people, if 100 people were surveyed, would most of them define her calling me overweight and telling me to stop complaining and do something about it? Is that nice? Is that positive? No, it's not positive. It was a negative statement that had an extremely positive impact on my life past that point in time, because it was the first time that someone was honest with me, which then caused me to be honest with me about being overweight, right? And anytime I look back in areas of my life where growth appeared, there was typically a negative experience that spurred that growth, right? And that negative experience could have been caused by someone else, from myself, me accepting something internally, right? And staring that thing closely in the face and saying, I'm not scared of you, but I'm going to solve you, right? And I'm going to fully understand as much as I can about this issue, and I'm going to solve this. And anytime you confront something about yourself that has not been improving, that you're unhappy about, typically that you've been complaining about, as soon as you confront that thing, you are now liberated to solve it, right? And the process of going from accepting that you have a problem in some area to solving it is typically not the best emotional state, because now you're kind of admitting that you got off track. Your habits need to change. Your thinking needs to change. The way you lead your daily activities has to change. Maybe some of the people you interact with has to change, right? It's a really difficult process, growth. But one thing that I found is a beautiful tool in my life is sitting in the discomfort. Sit in the discomfort. If everything feels comfortable, then you're not growing, right? But if you sit in the discomfort in an area where you want to desperately improve in your life or business, you sit in that discomfort. You let that discomfort chew at you and haunt you and eat at you and create questions in your mind. If you can have the courage to sit through that discomfort long enough with a solution-oriented mindset, we're not talking about false positive mind. Ooh, yippee, everything's great. No, not everything's great when you're looking to grow in an area of your life that hasn't improved in a while, right? I'm not saying it's just false positive emotion, but I'm saying, how do you take solution orientation and combine that with sitting in the problem, sitting in that darkness, that confusion, that uncertainty, right? And I look at this in my business, and this is why I always say business is the best personal development course you could ever buy, right? I mean, if you're looking to buy a business a personal development course, just get in the business, because when you get in the business, the marketplace is going to force you to confront yourself, force you to confront your weaknesses, force you to confront your strengths, because the market doesn't care what your problems are. The market just cares about supply and demand and whether or not people want what you're selling and whether or not you can deliver on your promises, and any areas where there's misalignments in a market is typically a reflection of the owner's weaknesses, right? And that's exciting, right? So sitting in that discomfort is something that I've noticed in my life is a sign that something great is about to happen. Something great is about to happen because an insight is about to occur, right? So whenever I ask people, I remember when I was starting my business, there was this person I lived with who would constantly say, "Oh, I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not scared. I'm not scared." Right? There's this person I lived with, started his own agency, would constantly say, "I'm not scared." And I would always tilt my head at that and go "Why aren't you scared? I'm scared. I'm signing up 20 times the clients than you're signing up, but why am I 20? I'm having 20 times the progress that you are in my business, 20 times the progress, but it seems like I'm way more scared than you." So do we want to be fearless, or do we want to act in spite of rational fear? This is why I hate when people call me, and believe me, I'm not this, but it's a term because I'm in a leadership role in my company, fearless leader, right? And I always correct them and say, "No, I am a fearful leader that acts in spite of my fear," right? There is no such thing as fearless in leadership. If you don't have any fear, then you're not leading, because it has nothing to do with being fearless. It has everything to do with acting in spite of the fear. And if you don't have fear, you shouldn't be a leader, because you need to have rational fear around your decisions. You always have to be worrying about what you don't know, right? As soon as you assume you know everything about something, you've just admitted that you know nothing about that thing, right? As soon as you get intellectually complacent around something where it's yeah, I already know it, I've done that before. Is any area of your life where you have that intellectual ignorance is an area where you stop growing, right? And fear triggers curiosity, right? I am scared to this day. I have deep-seated fears that something isn't going to go right with everything. And I would venture to guess, if you were to talk to most established leaders, they are more driven by fear than they are driven by abundance, right? Now, you listen to a YouTube video or a meditation from a monk or something, and it's all abundance. We must act for what we want, not what we want to avoid. Bullshit. It's just human behavior. We act more on avoidance of pain than we do going towards pleasure and things that we want. We want to avoid pain more than we want to pursue pleasure. It's just wired in us from 10,000 plus years of, we've only had about 10,000 years since the Ice Age to edit our DNA, right? And during the Ice Age for millions of years, we actually were in a survival mode where if we didn't find food that week, we could have died, right? And we've had millions of years for our DNA to adjust to the Ice Age, and we've only been out of the Ice Age for 10 or 12,000 years. So our DNA had 2 million years to adjust to the Ice Age and only 10,000 years to adjust to the modern age, right? So we are not perfectly adapted to the concrete jungle that we now live in, right? And that's okay. And those who can embrace their God-given fear, right? The fear that has been blessed upon them from eons of human development, right? The people who can embrace that fear and own that fear and admit that they are scared in areas of their life and business are the people who are going to improve faster, because on the other side of your deepest fears are going to be your biggest areas of improvement, right? Your biggest breakthroughs are going to be on the other side of your greatest fears, right? So I don't think growth is positive. I think the inception of growth is negative. I think the inception of growth is discovering pain points and areas where you are not growing, accepting those areas, creating awareness around those areas, and then sitting in the discomfort of that realization until you see a path so clear to get out of the situation, right? And we go through phases. We go through phases of momentum. We go through phases of analysis, right? And phases of momentum are where we kind of shut off the thinking brain and we take a ton of action and we don't really question any of our actions. And if you do that for a period of months, you're going to get some results, right? And what most people do once they get into a period of momentum is they just kind of end up flatlining, right? So they'll have a little period of momentum and they'll get a little bit of results from that, and then they'll just end up treading water for the rest of their life at that level, right? This is what some people call the circle of sameness, right? Where you'll have this one momentous breakthrough. Like a lot of people, it's like when they got their first job or they, met their wife or started their first business or went out on their own, right? There's this flood of energy, which would be labeled as momentum. I must succeed in this area. I'm going to give all of my brain to this thing. They go through one cycle of momentum, and then that turns into complacency, treading water, flatlining, most times for the rest of your life, right? And other people will go, okay, great, I've seen some success from this initial swing of momentum, but I'm not satisfied with that success. So I'm going to look at what things worked and what things, most importantly, didn't work. Because success is just as much about doubling down on what worked as it is eliminating that which didn't work, right? Especially on things that you suck at. And that's not comfortable. It's not comfortable to admit that you suck at things, that you continually drop the ball in specific areas in your life and business, that you hate doing certain things in your life and business. It's not easy to admit that stuff. It's not easy to admit your mistakes. It's not easy to admit where you aren't naturally blessed or gifted. It's not easy to admit that stuff, but you have a choice. We all have a choice. Do you want easy choices now and a hard life forever? Or do you want to make hard choices now so you can have an easy life forever, right? And my partner Andy always talks about this, but hard choice, getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym. It's hard for an hour, right? For some people, until you form a habit about going to the gym where it's easier to go to the gym than not. But for most people, getting up at 5 a.m. going to the gym, that's hard. If you do that every day, that's 1 hour of hard for 23 hours in your day of easy. Because everyone feels better after they exercise over the long term. That's 1 hour of hard over the course of weeks and months of you consistently exercising to give you years and years and years of easy because your cardio and your muscular fitness is on point, right? So do you want hard now, easy later? Or do you want make easy choices now? It's easy to sleep in. It's easy to skip the gym. It's easy to pick up a bag of potato chips. It's easy to overeat at the end of dinner and order more food than you should have eaten. All that stuff's easy. It's just given in the impulse, right? If you make easy choices now, you're going to have a hard life in the future. And these inverse relationships between inputs and outputs are very challenging in life and business, right? And I just think sitting in the uncomfortableness is something everyone can practice. And I know for me, after over 10 years of meditating almost every day, I've learned that within the discomfort, there is a path that will appear if you sit in that discomfort long enough, right? The old me would distract my mind. Like if I found something that was discomforting to me or did not create comfort in me. Let's say I realized something. Example. I'll give you a minor example of this. Like when we started in our business, embracing virtual events, right? Doing like events to sell and market our services and provide value to our audience. We started seeing a lot of success with events, but our entire sales and marketing process ended up becoming dependent on myself and my partner, Andy, right? Okay, great. So instead of facing that, we spent a year and a half not questioning that at all. Just riding the wave of, man, these events are working. Let's just ride the wave of these events. That's awesome. And in the back of our minds, Andy and I, we kept bringing up, it kind of sucks because like these events still mean that we're a little bit dependent. Like the company's sales and marketing is a little bit dependent on us. We didn't like that feeling. But we were getting enough results from them where we didn't really have to question them. Months, years, almost 2 years go by until we finally made a change about that, right? Where we said, that's it. We're hiring a sales team so that Andy and I are not needed in these events in order to reach our sales targets as a company, right? 2 years, I basically allowed treading water in that area of my business because I was afraid to look myself in the mirror and ask, what have I done to contribute to this situation? How am I going to create a sales process that works effortlessly without myself and my partner? What did I do to contribute to this? How can I get out of this? What solutions exist? How did we get here? These are questions I wanted to avoid. But until I sat in those uncomfortable questions long enough and asked those hard questions and started feeling a little anxious about it, a little unresolved, a little bit confused, until I sat there, the longer you sit in an uncomfortable emotion, the worse the emotion becomes. That's a good thing because no pain, no progress. If you don't have any pain around something, then you're less likely to make action around that thing. So we sat in that problem, we stewed in it, and then we said, come hell or high water, we're going to change this because we don't like it. So had we sat in that discomfort a little bit earlier, we would have built our sales team 2 years earlier in our business, but we were afraid to look in the mirror. We were afraid to look at what we were contributing to the problem, how we got ourselves in this position, and what we were going to do to permanently solve it, right? So as a takeaway, an invitation for you as a result of this episode, I would invite you to sit in discomfort a little bit more this year, 2025 and beyond. Sit in discomfort. Look at the areas of your life and business that are not improving, that you're consistently making excuses about, that you're consistently glossing over, you're distracting your mind from, you're avoiding. Look at those areas. Take the area that you make the most excuses about, that you most repetitively complain about. Take that area, whatever came to your mind, could be health, could be relationship, could be business, could be anything, right? Take that area and sit in it. Close your eyes. This is what I like doing, a resistance meditation, as I call it. Close your eyes, sit in it, and ask yourself, what do I resist about this topic? Oh, this. All right, what do I resist? And let as many thoughts pop up as possible around this topic, and then sit in them. Sit in them. And then pull out the notes of your phone and start writing down some of those things you resist around this thing. And sit in them. And then ask yourself, if there's one action I could take to solve all of these resistances, what would it be? And how fast can I get it into action? And I promise you, if you follow this practice, areas where you've been accepting complacency and you've been accepting a lack of growth, you will start immediately seeing the path that you've been hiding from yourself. So as a final point on this, like, don't think being positive all the time means that you are advancing in your life. Okay? If you do not have periods of reflection, staring in the mirror, asking yourself the hard questions, and sitting in that discomfort, negative emotions, it's very hard to grow from them. Part of the reason I have built a identity as someone who's high energy is because I spent years of my life suffering from anxiety disorder in a low energy state. And all happiness is only in context, right? If somebody was born in a perpetual happiness machine where dopamine was consistently released in their brain 24/7, 365, they would become desensitized to the dopamine. They would become desensitized to happiness, because happiness can only coexist with non-happiness. We must know what the opposite of happiness is in order to know what happiness is, right? So if you don't let yourself go into the negative place, the uncomfortable place, it's hard to be happy a lot of the time because there's nothing to compare the happiness with. So this is why you often see some of the happiest people are people who have been through a lot. They've been through a lot personally, and they never want to go back there. So they form habits to prevent themselves from ever going back to that place, right? And that's where sustainability comes from. But if you don't experience that negative emotion, that awakening, that never again feeling, I won't tolerate this anymore, that kind of negative realization-based feeling, if you don't ever experience that, then it's hard to feel the opposite of that. It's hard to feel abundance, momentum, positivity if you don't feel it. So again, there's many reasons to sit in the discomfort. And one of them is because if you sit in the discomfort, you're actually going to be happier over the long term, right? You're going to grow in your life. You're going to see areas where you've been accepting mediocrity for yourself, and you're going to see the path on how to improve those areas. And once you're on the path to improving those areas, it's lights out. I mean, you are a freight train. I always love when people say you don't need motivation, you need clarity. Completely agree with that statement. Clarity is 20 times more important than motivation. If people were just clear on exactly what they're going, exactly what they're trying to avoid in life, and exactly what they're trying to get in their life, if everyone was clear on that, people wouldn't have problems with motivation because they would know exactly where they're going and exactly what they're running away from. So ask yourself, do you need clarity or do you need motivation in 2025? Right? So sit in the discomfort, and I promise you the benefits that you will experience from that will be life-changing. I'll see you in the next episode.